This occurred several months ago. I've been working as a Lyft driver for a few years, mainly taking late-night shifts. The roads are quieter and tips are better, but there's a downside. Every so often, you encounter an experience that lingers with you, and not in a good way. I always considered myself careful and had dealt with my fair share of unusual passengers, but nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, could compare to what I'm about to share with you. I didn't have a dash cam at the time, but that night was the reason I got one installed. The night started off pretty typical, just me and the usual odd noises from my car. I drive a 2005 Volvo, which may not be in the best shape, but it's reliable. The streets were almost completely deserted, which was fine with me. Later, around 2 a.m., I received a request for a ride from a convenience store nearby. At first, it seemed like just another regular trip, but for some strange reason, I started getting this uneasy feeling in my stomach. You know that sense when something's just not right, but you can't put your finger on why. That's what hit me as I drove up to the store. When I got there, I realized what was wrong. The store was closed. All the lights were off, and not a single car was in the parking lot. I saw him before he even noticed me. I slowed down as I approached, wanting to get a good look at him. He was pacing in front of the store, wearing a worn-out hoodie that looked like it hadn't been washed in ages. It even had a hole in the sleeve. His movements were jittery, as if he couldn't stay still, and he kept glancing over his shoulder like someone was after him. If I had to guess, he was probably on something. At that point, I should have just canceled the ride and left. I even hovered my finger over the cancel button, but didn't press it. For some reason, I unlocked the door, and he slid into the back seat without a word. As soon as I took my foot off the brake, I regretted it. Most passengers either play on their phones or look out the window, but not him. He just stared at me through the rearview mirror, not blinking, not looking away. I tried not to meet his gaze, but a few times I caught his eye. He looked angry, which only made things worse. I turned on the radio to feel the silence, but he immediately snapped at me to turn it off. His voice was deep and raspy, a smoker's voice. That took me by surprise, and I almost swerved a little. I didn't want to make things worse, so I didn't say anything and kept driving in silence. I hoped he would stay quiet until we reached his destination, but then he spoke. He asked me if I ever picked up someone I shouldn't have. That question hit me hard. I nervously laughed and said, "Well, I hope not." I tried to keep the mood light, but he didn't respond. He just leaned back and muttered something under his breath, something I couldn't quite hear. Then he started talking about how he used to be an Uber driver, but quit because some punks had stolen things from his car. He was slurring his words a bit, but I could make out most of it. Every time I glanced in the mirror, I noticed he was smiling, which made everything even more unsettling. No one smiles while telling a story like that. He wrapped up his story by saying, "It's funny how much trust you put in someone sitting right behind you." That comment really got to me. I started thinking of him as more of a threat than just a crazy drug addict. Unfortunately, there was nothing I could do. My heart was racing and I focused on the road, trying to calm myself down, but he wouldn't stop talking. Some of it was disturbing, and the rest made no sense at all. I could hardly follow it. Eventually, he started apologizing to someone, though I don't think it was me. He kept saying he'd done something awful and was a bad person, repeatedly apologizing in a frantic manner. I didn't respond, afraid of what he might do if I did. I didn't know what he had done, and I didn't want to find out. We were only a few minutes away from his stop when he suddenly snapped out of his rambling and yelled at me that I missed a turn. The GPS said we were on track, but I slammed on the brakes out of sheer panic. He demanded that I pull over, so I did. My hands were shaking by then, and I just wanted to end this nightmare. At that moment, I saw headlights behind us, a police car. I silently prayed as it slowly passed, its spotlight briefly sweeping over my car. The guy in the back seat slouched down, trying to hide. I turned my head to look at him and saw him lying flat across the seat, eyes closed. I quickly looked away, trying to stay calm. He stayed like that for what felt like forever. I wanted to tell him to get out, but I didn't. Eventually, he lifted his head and told me I had gotten lucky. Before I could do anything, he opened the door and vanished into the night. I ended my shift right after that. I was shaken and didn't feel like driving anymore. A few weeks later, I saw something on my phone that confirmed how dangerous my situation had been. A news article reported that a convenience store just 2 blocks away from where I picked him up, had been robbed that night. It made my stomach turn, realizing I had been inches away from a dangerous criminal. I'm still shaken up, and I'm not sure if I could have helped by reporting it. I try to avoid police for personal reasons, and I'm not sure my report would even make a difference. I'm just way more cautious about who I let into my car now. If you dare to enter the world of the unknown, don't forget to like and subscribe. More terrifying stories await you if you're brave enough to listen.